On a rainy January afternoon in London, Prime Minister Keir Starmer sat in his Downing Street office, poring over reports about the British economy and international relations. The recent election of Donald Trump as President of the United States had raised concerns within the British government. "What do you think about the current situation with the United States?" Starmer asked his Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who had been critical of Trump in the past. Lammy, with a serious expression, replied, "The special relationship we've maintained with the United States for decades is at risk. Trump is unpredictable, and his policies could isolate us even further." At that moment, British Ambassador to Washington, Karen Pierce, called on the phone. "Prime Minister, I have just met with President Trump," Pierce said in a concerned tone. "He expressed concerns about our recent policies and suggested that we reconsider our approach to China." Starmer sighed. "We cannot afford to alienate the United States," he said. "We must find a way to repair our relationship with President Trump." The next day, Starmer and Lammy met with the U.S. ambassador in London, who conveyed the White House's displeasure with recent British policies. "The President is not pleased with your recent actions," the ambassador said. "He expects a closer alignment between our two countries." Lammy, with a defiant tone, responded, "We will not be dictated to. Our policies are in line with what is best for the British people. However, we are open to dialogue with the United States." Back in Washington, President Trump, seated at the Resolute desk, was deep in conversation with his national security advisor. "I've been watching the UK's moves very closely," Trump said. "They need to get on board with us on China, or they'll be left behind. We can't keep bending over backwards for them." "Mr. President," the advisor replied, "we understand your frustration, but we must also recognize the UK's strategic importance. They are our closest ally, and we can't afford to push them too far." Meanwhile, in London, Starmer and Lammy strategized how to address the growing tensions. "We need to make some concessions, David," Starmer said, his voice filled with resolve. "But we must also make it clear that we cannot follow every whim of the American administration." Lammy nodded. "It's a balancing act. We don't want to lose our independence, but we also cannot ignore the weight of the U.S. relationship." As the diplomatic crisis unfolded, both nations were caught in a delicate dance. The British government worked on crafting a statement that would reassure the United States without compromising their own stance on key issues. Over the next several weeks, the tension began to ease slightly, as both sides engaged in negotiations, with Trump making a surprise gesture by inviting Starmer to the White House for a face-to-face meeting. At the meeting, Starmer took a bold approach, speaking candidly about the UK's position on China and other global issues. Trump's initial blunt demeanor softened as the two leaders found common ground on several fronts. "All right, Keir," Trump said, offering a handshake. "You've got your policies, and I've got mine. But I respect you standing your ground. Let's work together." With that, the first signs of reconciliation began to show. The British press, however, remained skeptical, with many commentators predicting that the special relationship would face many more challenges in the coming years. Back in London, Lammy reflected on the outcome. "We've made a deal, but at what cost?" he said to Starmer. "There's no telling how long this fragile peace will last." Starmer, with a weary smile, replied, "It's politics, David. We do what we must to ensure the country's future, even if it means navigating through rocky waters." The drama surrounding the UK-US relationship continued to evolve, with both nations under pressure to maintain their historic ties while adapting to a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. Whether the special relationship would survive Trump's unpredictable leadership and the growing influence of China remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: diplomacy in the age of Trump was far from straightforward.